November 19th, 2025, 0247 hours, 18 nautical miles southwest of Curaçao. The senior radar operator aboard the USS Gonzales was 3 hours into a quiet mid-watch when his display changed in a way that made his stomach drop. 61 contacts, then 70, then 84. All appearing within 70 seconds, all small, all moving in tight formation at 120 knots on a bearing that pointed directly at his ship and at the USS Harrington, a guided missile frigate running parallel track 900 yards to port. He didn't touch the alert button immediately. He ran a built-in test on the radar system first, checked the software version log, looked for the kind of signature a seabird flock produces when the system misclassifies organic contacts at low altitude. He needed 4 seconds to confirm that what he was seeing was real. It was real. Venezuela had launched the largest coordinated drone attack ever attempted against U.S. naval forces in the Western Hemisphere. 89 Iranian-manufactured Shahed 136 loitering munitions, each one purchased for roughly $11,000, each one carrying a shaped-charge warhead designed to penetrate armored vehicles, each one now on a terminal course toward 2 American warships with a combined replacement value exceeding $3.1 billion. The financial ratio was almost too absurd to process in the moment. Under $1 million in Iranian-made hardware targeting assets that represented decades of American shipbuilding and the permanent deployment of technological capability that most nations couldn't replicate with unlimited time and money. But Caracas wasn't running a cost-benefit analysis. They were running a humiliation calculus. 3 years of escalating American sanctions, frozen overseas accounts, diplomatic isolation enforced by Washington with the patient consistency of a slow vice. Venezuelan military leadership had been told by Russian advisors that the Americans would absorb an attack on naval assets rather than risk the international fallout of striking Venezuelan soil. That American political constraints made serious retaliation impossible, that the risk was manageable. Every one of those assessments was wrong, and the people who made them were not the ones who would pay for being wrong. The drones came in 4 waves, staggered by 40 seconds. Standard Shahed 136 doctrine adapted for maritime targeting. The first wave to trigger and map the point defense response. Subsequent waves to exploit whatever gaps the first wave revealed. The Gonzales' Phalanx Block 1B mount acquired the first wave at 4,200 yards and opened fire. The system operates autonomously in surface engagement mode. The operator designates the threat sector, and the Phalanx makes all subsequent decisions without human input. The M61A1 Vulcan rotary cannon produces 4,500 rounds per minute of 20mm tungsten penetrators in bursts calibrated to the system's real-time kill probability calculation. 22 drones from the first wave disintegrated within 1,800 yards of the ship. 7 got through. 3 of those 7 hit the Gonzales' superstructure in a 2-second window. The Shahed 136's warhead is a shaped charge optimized for penetrating tank armor, which means it was somewhat over-engineered for aluminum superstructure and somewhat under-engineered for the reinforced spaces below the main deck. The Combat Direction Center took 2 direct impacts. 6 sailors were killed in the initial detonation. 12 more were wounded. The third drone hit the forward equipment space and knocked out the forward Aegis radar array. The Gonzales was still maneuvering and still fighting, but her sensor picture had just been degraded significantly. 2 more drones struck below the waterline in the aft section, opening 2 compartments to flooding. The damage control teams immediately began fighting. The Harrington's situation was worse. The frigate had 1 phalanx mount and a CRAM launcher, a configuration that assumes the outer defensive layers of a carrier strike group are handling the mass saturation before anything reaches the frigate's own defenses. Operating as an independent unit without those outer layers, the Harrington was fighting alone against a wave structure that had been designed to probe and saturate. Her phalanx killed 19 drones from the second and third waves. The CRAM launcher expended 14 missiles and killed 14 more. Then the fourth wave arrived while the CRAM was reloading, and the phalanx was tracking 12 simultaneous contacts in its threat queue. 5 drones hit the Harrington within 4 seconds. 1 struck the bridge. The commanding officer and 9 officers were killed instantly. A second drone penetrated the engine room. Fuel lines severed. Steam system rupture. The third hit the combat systems module and destroyed the primary fire control processing hardware. By the time the 4th and 5th impacts registered, the Harrington had lost propulsion, lost fire control, and was listing 8 degrees to starboard with flooding in 3 compartments. In Caracas, the initial damage reports reached Venezuelan Naval Command at 0304. The generals and the Russian advisors who had been monitoring through signals intelligence were watching what looked like the most successful asymmetric naval strike in Latin American history. 2 American warships crippled. 6 sailors confirmed dead, more expected, all for $978,000 in drone hardware. State Television's broadcast team was already preparing footage packages. Russia's Defense Export Division was quietly composing talking points about Shahed 136 effectiveness. The celebration had started before anyone in that room stopped to think about what happens after you attack American warships and kill American sailors. They had 23 minutes to enjoy it. What Venezuela's military command did not know, what their Russian advisors had specifically assessed as unlikely, was that the Gonzales and Harrington had not been operating alone. They were the visible component of a positioning exercise that U.S. Southern Command had been running for 7 weeks in near-total communication silence. The USS Bataan, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, was holding position 260 nautical miles north with 12 F-35B Lightning IIs on her flight deck, engines warm, pilots in cockpits on 15-minute alert. The USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group was 280 miles east with 8 FA-18E Super Hornets on deck alert and 4 EA-18G. Growler electronic warfare aircraft already airborne on a routine patrol track that happened to be pointed southwest. 3 Virginia-class attack submarines were operating on patrol tracks that had been progressively tightening toward the Venezuelan coast for 11 days. Their vertical launch tubes loaded with Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles. The authorization code for retaliatory strike had been drafted at U.S. Southern Command 6 weeks earlier and updated twice since then. It required one input to execute, confirmation that American vessels had been attacked. At 0302, that confirmation was transmitted. The strike package began assembling. The EA-18G Growlers moved first, not because they carried bombs, but because nothing that followed them would work as intended without what they did first. The ALQ-99 jamming system aboard each Growler is a broadband electronic attack suite that operates across the frequency ranges used by radar systems, communications networks, and data links simultaneously. When 4 Growlers operating in coordinated formation activate their jamming pods against a target area, they don't produce static on specific channels. They produce an electromagnetic environment in which every system trying to transmit or receive in that frequency band finds itself operating in a noise floor that makes signal discrimination impossible. By 0318, the Venezuelan Integrated Air Defense Network, the S-300 VM batteries, the Buk M2 mobile systems, the coastal radar chain, the command communication links connecting all of it was operating in silence. Not because the systems had been destroyed, because every signal they produced was being overwhelmed by broadband jamming at power levels the Russian-designed equipment hadn't been tested against in operational conditions. Venezuelan radar operators watched their displays dissolve into uniform noise. They switched frequencies, more noise, emergency bands, silence. They knew the Americans were coming. They had no way to tell each other where. The Tomahawks launched at 0324. 58 missiles from 3 submarines, rising from depth on sequential firing sequences, transitioning to air-breathing flight, dropping to terrain following altitude, and beginning the 19-minute flight to Venezuelan targets on GPS-guided routes programmed weeks earlier and updated twice in the preceding 72 hours with imagery from reconnaissance satellites. The target list had been built on a specific logic, not maximum destruction, but maximum and durable degradation of Venezuelan military capability. Everything on the list was something that would take years and billions of dollars to replace, that couldn't be reconstructed with locally available resources, and whose loss would structurally reduce Venezuela's ability to threaten American forces or assets in the region. Caracas Air Base. Venezuela's primary operating base for its Su-30 Mk-2 flanker fleet, and the facility that had maintained and fueled the drone swarm logistics support. 9 Tomahawks arrived in a 50-second window. Aviation fuel storage erupted in a fire visible from 40 miles. 3 hardened aircraft shelters collapsed. 2 runway sections cratered. 21 aircraft destroyed on the ground, including 7 of Venezuela's 14 operational Su-30S Puerto Cabello Naval Base. Venezuela's largest naval facility and the origin port of the vessels that had conducted the drone launch operation. 16 Tomahawks, 5 surface combatants sunk at their moorings. The main ammunition storage complex detonated in a secondary explosion that registered on seismic sensors 90 miles away and produced a pressure wave that shattered windows in the port city. The blast crater was visible in commercial satellite imagery for 3 days. The S-300VM air defense batteries. 4 complete systems, each one representing roughly $200 million in Russian defense export revenue, positioned at 4 sites that American intelligence had tracked continuously for 14 months. 12 Tomahawks, 3 per battery. They arrived at all 4 sites within a 9-second window, which was the point. Sequential arrivals allow operators to attempt emergency shutdown and displacement. Simultaneous arrivals against all 4 sites meant no battery had warning from the others. $800 million in Russian air defense hardware became scrap metal before the crews at any individual site understood they were being targeted. The radar installations. 41 fixed and semi-fixed radar facilities across the northern Venezuelan coast that formed the detection layer of the air defense network. The Growlers had already blinded them electronically. The Tomahawks made that blindness permanent. 33 sites destroyed. The manned aircraft followed the cruise missiles by 28 seconds, time so that they arrived over target areas where the air defense radar network had just been physically eliminated rather than merely jammed. F-35Bs from the Bataan and FA-18Es from the Ronald Reagan Working Coordinated Strike Packages, GBU 39 small diameter bombs and GBU 53 Stormbreaker glide munitions releasing from standoff range against communication relay towers, ground-based command centers, and secondary military infrastructure. Venezuelan Su-30 pilots scrambled from dispersal fields where some aircraft had survived the initial Tomahawk strikes. 8 managed to get airborne. Their radars were producing jammed returns. Their ground controllers were transmitting into a communications environment that the Growlers had rendered useless. They climbed into the dark looking for contact signatures that weren't resolving. The F-35Bs found them first. At 65 miles, using sensor fusion that combined their own APG-81 radar returns with infrared tracking data from the distributed aperture system and targeting information passed through the tactical data link from the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting offshore, the F-35 pilots had complete situational awareness of all 8 Su-30 SL before any Venezuelan pilot knew he was being targeted. 8 AIM-12 ODAMR-AAMS, 8 Venezuelan aircraft. The AMR-AAMS were in autonomous terminal homing before any Su-30 radar warning receiver processed the launch. 8 aircraft, 8 ejections or impact events. The exchange happened so far beyond visual range that the Venezuelan pilots who ejected successfully reported never having seen an American aircraft. The last American aircraft recovered to its ship at 0441. Total elapsed time from first Tomahawk launch to last aircraft recovery, 77 minutes. 0 American aircraft lost. 0 American pilots injured. The Gonzales and Harrington remained afloat with damage control teams managing flooding and casualty evacuation underway. The accounting requires the same specific framing as the engagement itself. Not just what was spent, but what was achieved and at what cost ratio. Venezuela expended 89 Shahed 136 drones at approximately $11,000 each, $979,000. The attack killed 6 American sailors, wounded 29 more, and left 2 American warships damaged and temporarily degraded in capability. The Gonzales required 11 months of repairs. The Harrington required 14. The American response expended 58 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles at $1.87 million each, 8 AIM-120Ds, approximately 40 precision-guided bombs of various types, and 4 EA-18G Growler sorties. Total munitions expenditure, approximately $133 million. Venezuelan losses from the response, 21 frontline aircraft including 7 irreplaceable Su-30 IS, 5 surface combatants, 4 S-300VM batteries, 33 radar installations, 12 command and communication facilities, 1 ammunition depot containing 6 months of operational stock, and the functional coherence of an integrated air defense network that had taken 20 years and Russian technical assistance to build. Conservative total assessed value, $4.2 billion. More practically, Venezuela lost 50% of its operational air combat capability and 100% of its long-range air defense capability in 77 minutes, and would not be able to reconstruct either within the following decade given its economic constraints and arms embargo status. The cost exchange ratio was 31-to-1 in dollar terms. In operational effect, it was not measurable by the same scale. Russia's reaction operated on two levels simultaneously. Publicly, condemnation of American aggression and calls for UN Security Council emergency session. Privately, a crisis in the Defense Export Division as customers from 3 continents began asking pointed questions about S-300 system survivability against American electronic warfare and precision strike packages. The 4 Venezuelan S-300 VMs had been destroyed without the Growler jamming environment ever being lifted, meaning American cruise missiles had hit targets that Russian air defense doctrine had assessed as protected by active radar coverage. The doctrine was wrong in ways that mattered to every country that had purchased Russian air defense systems as their primary protection against American air power. Indian procurement officials requested briefings. Several Middle Eastern defense ministries quietly adjusted pending orders. Iran's aerospace force watched footage of 89 Shahed 136 drones, their most widely exported product, and the weapon system that had made Iran the world's primary drone warfare proliferator, being defeated at the point defense layer and immediately followed by the destruction of the infrastructure that launched them. The drone's effectiveness against unprepared targets in conflicts where no phalanx or CRAM system was defending had generated enormous export interest and significant leverage for Iranian regional influence. Watching 89 of them fail to prevent a retaliatory strike of this magnitude against the nation that deployed them complicated the product's reputation in ways that Iranian state media couldn't fully manage. China's military strategists held sessions that the People's Daily didn't cover. They had been operating on an assessment that American political risk aversion made large-scale conventional retaliation against nations that attacked American forces in the Western Hemisphere unlikely. Venezuela had, at significant cost, provided an empirical test of that assessment. The assessment was wrong. The sessions were about updating models, not mourning Venezuelan losses. Chinese strategic culture is not sentimental about the experiences of other nations, but it is systematic about incorporating evidence into planning. Every government in Latin America that had been calculating, quietly, whether American security commitments and American red lines were real or rhetorical received the same data point simultaneously. Nicaragua reviewed its military posture. Cuba examined its exposure. Bolivia's defense ministry produced an internal assessment that 3 separate intelligence services subsequently reported as concluding the Americans respond at scale faster than any defensive preparation can mitigate. Maduro remained in his hardened bunker for 4 days after the strikes. The fires at Puerto Cabello were still burning when he emerged. The first public statement his government issued described American aggression and promised resistance. It did not address the specific questions Venezuelan military families were asking about casualties, about aircraft, about what the drone attack had actually been intended to accomplish, and what it had actually accomplished. The Gonzales and Harrington were towed to Roosevelt Roads for emergency repair assessment. The names of 6 sailors killed in the initial attack were released 48 hours later. Their funerals happened at naval bases and small towns across the country, while Venezuela's defense ministry was still trying to compile an accurate inventory of what it had lost. Venezuela spent $979,000 in drone hardware and 23 minutes of apparent victory. It purchased the systematic destruction of its military infrastructure, the termination of its air defense capability, the elimination of half its combat aircraft, and the concrete demonstration to every potential adversary watching that the distance between attacking American warships and losing your country's military capacity is measured in the flight time of a Tomahawk. Some lessons come with a simple price tag. This one came with a 31-to-1 exchange ratio, a decade of forced disarmament, and the specific clarity that comes from having your Russian-supplied air defense batteries turned into scrap metal before you finished counting what you thought you'd won. The Caribbean kept moving, the trade lanes stayed open, American naval operations in the region resumed without interruption, and somewhere in the debris field around Puerto Cabello, the remnants of the calculation that attacking U.S. warships was an acceptable risk settled toward the bottom of the sea next to the ships that had made it. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what modern escalation actually looks like, share it and subscribe. The decisions that start these engagements and the mathematics that end them are worth understanding before someone else makes the same calculation.